I know better than most how much you've grown, and I have every confidence you'll make your people proud. Gods know I'm proud of you. I always will be. You deserve all the happiness in the world, and more.
Hello, it's an unlucky footage-stealing baker here with another video about Ryne and Thancred. In the last part, we went over the Eden story, where we saw Ryne growing further and becoming friends with Gaia, which makes Thancred and Urianger a lot more confident in departing to the source. So next up, we have 5.3. This is where we get the big moment that has been at the back of your mind for a long time now, when Thancred and the Scions have to finally leave Ryne behind. You have this wonderful sequence where everyone gets to say their goodbyes and everything is neatly wrapped up. We are gonna be revisiting this sequence with other characters as well, so I won't spend too much time pondering on this part, but in regards to Ryne and Thancred, here's where all that character growth and anticipation culminates into this one moment. Does it pay off? The short answer is, hell to the yes. Honestly, it made me cry. Probably the most I cried while playing this game, especially that one line by Thancred, where he says that he's proud of her and he feels happy having raised her to the best of his ability, finally being able to depart with peace and comfort. And who wouldn't, with such good writing? For you to not get emotional, you must either be a sociopath or you didn't pay any attention to the story. And I'm not referring to this part in specific, I mean with the 5.3 conclusion as a whole. It's just that this one moment and that one line was what broke me completely. All that build up, all that emotion, masterfully crafted and delivered in one incredibly powerful line of dialogue. They had a story that they wanted to tell and they executed it perfectly. It was this amazing conclusion to 5.3 and this amazing conclusion to Ryne's and Thancred's character arc that inspired me to start making these videos in the first place, because I wanted to provide anyone watching with a rewind of being able to look at these characters and how they developed throughout the story and how they contributed to providing this amazing experience that was Shadowbringers. So yes, not much to say here other than holy shit did they match my expectations and then surpass them by a mile. I have said before that if you were to put all the story of 5.0 till 5.3 and make it into an offline RPG, I would consider that game worth $100 easily. It's just that good. I also want to just say in hindsight that just imagine if they had actually killed Thancred off back in 5.0. Whatever emotional impact that scene would have had pales in comparison to what we got here, in my opinion at least. Anyway, before I start gushing and going in circles, because honestly there isn't much to add to this scene, it's simply wholesome, so let's move on to the next bit. Thancred leaves his gunblade behind for Ryne, and they all leave to the source. So, transition time. A short amount of time passes and you go check on the situation with Ryne and Gaia. During this time, they've been leveling up their social link, and you can tell that they have been pretty much fine on their own. Ryne has kept up her training and studying, and Gaia has joined in on the studying as well, and they both have been in general just developing their social skills and getting to know the world better essentially. They even decided to arrange a festival to relieve stress off of people and as a token of appreciation. It's not explicitly stated if Ryne was the one to come up with the idea. She just says it came up amongst the youth, but even if she was only among the people that came up with it still shows some nice growth on her character once again, with being able to take initiative when the situation demands it. And setting up a festival, yeah, it sounds like something an altruistic persona like herself would be totally down with. So there's some great stuff already. Then the three of you go to the empty, only to find out that everything has decayed to what it was around the time of Eden's Gate. This is because of Ryne's shenanigans, where she overflowed the ether currents with ice aspected / umbral ether, thus making everything swing too much to the passive umbral pole, ergo undoing most of your efforts during Eden's Burst, as all the elements during Eden's Burst were astral / active elements like lightning, wind and fire, aside from ice at the end of course. Ryne starts to then show this really low self-esteem again, but before it can get worse, you figure that if you just balance the passive light aspected ether with active dark aspected ether, then you can in theory fix this situation. This is of course technical, as it's difficult to come up with an enemy that is pure dark aspected ether, and defeating primals that represent astral elements like the ones I just mentioned might not be that efficient and could mess with the elements. The way you decide to go about it is that you have Gaia draw out the dark ether, Ryne tries to keep away the ambient light ether, and you focus your thoughts on the cloud of darkness. This trick actually works, but nothing seems to be happening with the elements regardless. Then this dude called Mitron rolls up. He's an Ascian. It's revealed that he's the fairy who's been speaking to Gaia all this time. You find out that he's basically the original Sin Eater, in other words, Eden. Here's how that happened. The failure of the 13th shard began causing issues in all the other shards, notably the first that was starting to become overflown with light aspected ether. Not wanting the same fate to happen to the first, as completely destroyed shards are completely useless to them, Emet-Selch sends Mitron and Logarith over to the first to make sure that it doesn't get consumed with light. Harpert and the gang roll up though and beat the ever-living crap out of Ascian Prime, which now consists of Mitron and Logarith. Logarith is fine and gets resurrected as Ascians normally do, but Mitron ends up getting overkilled with a blade of light while still in his corporal form. This action had some weird consequences. Mitron's soul started to become twisted and warped by this, and he was now taken over by this primal instinct of simply wanting to banish all things darkness, as this was Harpert's will when he struck him down with that blade of light. This resulted in him unleashing the flood of light. But when Minfilia came to stop said flood, Mitron became sentient again, though he was unable to really do much, so he was just kinda chilling, and obviously Emet-Selch didn't give a damn, so he just left him there to rot. This went on until you came about and started slaying the Light Wardens, which allowed him even more control, so he could start manipulating Gaia. So the shocking revelation here is that you have been working all this time to help this Ascian free themselves. This also helps to explain Eden's power in regards to the whole creation magic aspect, as it's an Ascian. Next, there's this wholesome scene where Ryne once again shows low self-esteem just like before, if only momentarily. This is broken up by the realization that Gaia is starting to forget things. Yao then decide to refresh Gaia's memories and reminisce about Thancred and Urianger, which is kind of a touching moment, I'll be honest. You get to see Ryne's personal thoughts on both of them and how she perceives them now that they are away. But it's pretty much as you'd expect to. It's cool nonetheless though. You also ponder if the reason that restoring life to the empty has been a struggle was because of Eden sucking all that rebalanced ether. So you go meet Mitron inside Eden. He's gonna try to refresh Gaia's memories by reenacting the Shadowkeeper versus Harpert and gang fight. Gaia is encouraged by Ryne and the Warrior of Light to not mess with that. Mitron then gets upset and forces Gaia to do it anyway by abducting her or something. It's magic. Ryne, for the third time, is feeling defeated, but you manage to encourage her and then you go confront the Shadowkeeper. Mitron's plan here is to basically make Gaia, aka Logarith, remember the events that took place that day, as they both were there to witness the encounter. This actually works, and she remembers that she's an Ascian, but she maintains that she would rather be a part of the new group that she found and live in this moment rather than some fabricated past that she had. Mitron realizing that only Gaia could make his favorite pancakes, gets very upset at this notion and forces her to be a part of him, turning into Ascian Prime as they did 100 years ago. He does this to basically force Gaia to remember her past as a member of the Convocation of 14, as he doesn't have the soul crystals that Emetzelk and the others used to return sundered souls to their office. There's also this horrifying implication that she may have already forgotten all about Ryne. You and Ryne aren't happy about this Ascian Prime business, of course, but before you can do anything, he uses creation magic against you by having you fight Ryne's nightmares. As for why exactly he does this is a bit unclear, but I assume he gleaned from Ryne's comment that she had a troubled past, thus concluding that her thoughts could create a powerful enemy that would straight up kill you. Now, this fight is definitely really cool. It takes events and characters off of Ryne's story and combines it into one nightmare-filled encounter. It has aspects of Votri, Thancred, Ranjit, Urianger, and in Savage there's even a reference to Void Walker/Gaia. I am especially a fan of how voice acting was utilized here, with how he has Thancred's voice, but it sometimes plays Ranjit's lines, and how he gets more desperate as the fight goes on, Ryne being terrified at what's happening, and so on. Not to mention how the fight incorporates some of those story elements into it. But we aren't discussing the fights here, so that's gonna be a topic for another time. So, you defeat Fatebreaker, but as expected, Mitron is still really adamant about this rewriting memories business, and Gaia tries to break free, but as a reaction, he's gonna start destroying Gaia's memories. This part kinda hit me on a personal level, because I've had to deal with something similar myself. I normally don't talk about my personal life on this channel, cause let's be honest, no one wants to listen to another person's sobbing stories, but I feel like it's relevant to share it here. My aunt, who passed away years ago, had Alzheimer's. At first it was kind of a slow process, but she eventually started forgetting a lot of things. Since me and my siblings are kind of not within her inner family circle, she first forgot about all of us, of course, but it was even harder having to hear how she had forgotten about her daughter and my mother. Obviously, Alzheimer's also comes with a ton of other things, such as being unable to perform even the most basic tasks and such. But what I'm trying to get at here is that I can relate to the theme that is being portrayed here in this storyline, since it happened to me on such a personal level. And I can tell you straight up that it's a very terrifying thing to happen. Having a loved one forget all about you and your family like you never existed to them. Now, obviously with Ryne and Gaia, they haven't known each other that long, and especially we as players get to see even less of that since they had some interactions off screen, but as I mentioned previously, it makes a lot of sense that they would grow close really fast. So yes, her memories being destroyed visibly in front of her puts her in a state of shock momentarily, which is understandable, like, who wouldn't? As I said, this must be a really horrifying thing to witness. Now, if you recall, I have been saying throughout this video that Ryne is having low self-esteem at times. I think the idea here is that she's feeling less confident without Thancred and Urianger around, so whenever she's facing a challenge, she's sorta regressing back to that state that she was when we first met her all the way back in the 5.3 MSQ. But after seeing the Ascian destroying those memories and mocking them, she becomes more pissed off than anything, especially for the hypocrisy of the Ascian. See, the interesting thing here is that due to what we learned playing Shadowbringers, we know that the sundered Ascians aren't the real people that lived in Omorod before the sundering. They are normal, fragmented people who were given a soul crystal of one of the seats in the Convocation. This is the BS that Ryne is calling out Mitron for, because he too is fragmented. He just has fake memories essentially. So, since the real Mitron and the real Logarith had this relationship between them, it makes Mitron, or Artemis, be naturally affected towards Gaia. This is a cool thing to bring up, IMO, because it addresses the question of what if those soul crystals have memories in them that might make a person have an emotional attachment to someone. It's also interesting to think about things such as if Emet and the others knew about this, or if the two had managed to keep it a secret. Though more than likely it's the former, that this was something Emet simply put up with, and it makes sense since the two were always paired together. Anyway, Mitron realizes he's kind of out of options here, since with all three paragons dead, he has zero hope of accomplishing any rejoinings on his own. Thus, he concludes that the best choice is to say screw everything and just suck all the ether from this land to create a make-believe world, or an utopia, by using Eden. Ryne isn't having any of that, and using her oracle powers gives you an opening to go have a fist fight with Eden's promise. We all know that it's not a JRPG unless it ends with a fist fight against God, basically. He fights like a bitch, of course, abusing both the memories of the warrior flight against them, and also trying his hardest to delete what little memories Gaia has left.
Delicious, aren't they?
These are actually quite good.
See? Let's have another one. Half each?
Such fragile feelings, memories.
What happened to the other half?
Am I being erased from her memory?
I told you it would make a great necklace.
Oh, it's beautiful. I think it'll really suit you.
Me? But I thought you should have it.
They shatter. They fade.
Is this ice? Where did this come from?
If this goes on much longer, she'll forget everything. How about... this one?
That's my color. Now, this one on the other hand... What am I doing with this? I'd never wear this color.
No! We can't let this happen!
You are unworthy of our utopia.
But as always, you end up prevailing by doing the thing that the warrior flight does best, which is beat the crap out of anything that is thrown your way. Problem just is that Gaia kind of shuts down, which is a bit strange, but I myself saw it as her no longer having memories in this world. So she kind of just stops existing in the world, only existing in this empty void in her head. You know, it's fantasy, we don't really need to look at it deeper than that. Anyway, I guess now is a good time to talk about Mitron, since there is this little touching moment with him at the end. The setup here is really cool and really in line with Shadowbringers, where we are shown that the Scions are more than just herder evil guys. Mitron, or Artemis, throughout this is obsessed with bringing back Gaia, and you gotta feel for the guy a bit. I mean, he was separated from the most important person in his life for 100 freaking years, and then after a long time he finally reunites, and the only person he ever cared about tells him that she doesn't care about him anymore, as she doesn't remember him and wants to live a new life without any of the memories you made together. That must be pretty devastating for just about anyone. And what is important to note here is that yes, their relationship is definitely fabricated, as they are based off of fake memories. However, their relationship itself and the emotions they feel are still very much genuine. Thus, the person, Artemis, is still feeling real pain here. I think it's a shame really, because Mitron could have left a much more lasting impression if he was perhaps introduced a bit earlier and we had seen more of him, but he kinda appears at the very end of this storyline, so even though the story itself and the setup is interesting and has promise, it still feels like there could have simply been more. Nonetheless, I did enjoy what we got a lot. So yeah, Gaia is struggling to remember what she is or where she should be, but she's able to remember Ryne thanks to a memento, and Ryne is able to bring her back, after which there is this amazing shot where you see everything coming to life, which is of course meant to be symbolic with how Gaia is the personification of fertility and the earth itself. Of course, the immediate effect can only be seen in places where the ether currents intersect, such as where we are, and it's going to take a long time for those effects to become widespread, but everyone is happy nonetheless. The story then ends with arguably the first real character moment with Gaia, where she confesses that she has feelings towards Mitron, and she will try to retain those memories and remember Mitron in a good light, understanding that his actions were very humane and understandable. Though, as an outsider looking in, being forgiving towards him is a bit messed up when you consider that he was still an Ascian and wanted genocide, was tempered by Zodiark and all that fun stuff. But it wouldn't really make much sense for her to think about that stuff in character regardless. Anyway, once again, it's shown that even though those feelings that Gaia have originated from the Soul Crystal's memories, they still became real with their interactions together. Hence, she feels empathetic towards Mitron in the end. Ryne, on the other hand, is just happy that she got her friend back, and they start preparing for the festival now. And there we have it. That's the end of Eden's Promise and Ryne's story, at least for the time being, as there is bound to be more, of course. As these videos probably made clear, I absolutely loved her and Thancred's character arcs in both 5.3 and through Eden till 5.3. I think it was all very organic and well executed. The Eden's Promise story definitely went by a lot quicker by comparison, but I think the takeaway here is that it kind of leaves us in a similar spot as we had at the end of her and Thancred's story in 5.0, which is that they can now choose to go in so many directions to flesh out the relationship between Ryne and Gaia. I guess this is a good segue to talk about Gaia, as I mentioned I would in the last part. Gaia herself hasn't really been fleshed out that much as a character, as most of her time in the story she's been just kind of part of the plot, having to be saved or having issues of some sort, but I think she has a lot of potential as a character going forward. As far as her personality goes, she honestly reminds me a lot of Rinoa from FF8, which could be intentional of course, as both were written by Nomura and what with all the FF8 references here in Eden, but I refer to basically this spoiled princess aspect that is sometimes brought up with her in More and Descent. Dare I even say that she has similar vibes as Rinoa as well. I know that she comes off as really broody at the start, but I think a lot of that was her being confused and the quote-unquote fairy messing with her. Once you get to the end of Eden's Promise, she actually has a pretty outgoing personality, though same as Ryne, she's kind of clumsy at times of course. I also love the interactions between her and Ryne. They made me laugh on multiple occasions, and I appreciate having some lightheartedness within an otherwise pretty dark story. There's just a lot of chemistry between them, and the stage is set for prepping up a really cool relationship between them. Another thing similar to Rinoa is the whole thing with her being an Ascian, the prospect of her being a potentially dangerous person who might have something bad happen, such as becoming tempered to Zodiark, and you may have to end up fighting her, being a parallel with that same kind of situation we had in FF8 with Rinoa. Though I guess funnily enough, we did already fight her, technically twice even, or hell, thrice if you want to count Idol of Darkness. Speaking of which, can we talk about the fact that she's a freaking Ascian? There's so much cool shit they can do with this aspect of her. For one, something that was already brought up during the Eden's Promise story was the idea that she could travel between the shards, being an Ascian. Picture a scenario where she travels to the source and wants to be a part of the Scions. Would the rest be able to trust her, knowing of her past? Would Thancred be upset about her leaving Ryne behind? In what ways would she be able to contribute to the party with her powers, being an Oracle of Darkness and an Ascian? Since, if you recall, I've been mentioning all throughout this the ways the writers utilize Ryne's oracle powers, so I have confidence that they'd be able to implement clever ways to do the same with Gaia, both minor and major ways to make use of her special abilities. Furthermore, the writers can also generate this constant nagging thought and anxious feeling of, oh, but what if something bad happens with her? This would add a nice little conflict, as both the party and you as the player are having to consider the option of what if you will end up having to have a confrontation with her to create this kind of a tragic encounter that you don't want to fight, kind of like what we had back in Final Coil with Luzua. I could probably keep going on with these random thoughts, and this was something that came off the top of my head off of literally one thought. There are just so many ways they can utilize her as a character and serve the narrative, all while making her a great addition to the cast in this story. I gotta say that initially I had doubts about Gaia as an addition, but after Eden's Promise, I'm really convinced that she was a great addition, and I'm excited to see what they will do with her moving forward. The festival especially should be a really fun sequence. I'm kinda hoping they do something like the festival in FF8, where you can choose the instruments used or another similar thing, and what you will pick will dictate the outcome. So, like, you pick a terrible combination of instrument, it ends up with everyone being in a sour mood. Or if you pick the perfect composition, you get some wholesome scene. Last thing I wish to discuss before I wrap up this video. Remember in the first part when I brought up the relationship between Thancred and Minfilia, and how a certain portion of the community perceived that relationship as being romantic? Well, a similar thing is going on with Ryne and Gaia here. Now, I normally really don't like discussing these types of topics, as I'm not really big on shipping characters and such, but I feel like it's something I should bring up nonetheless. What I'm referring to is that I've seen people on Reddit, on YouTube comments, on random convos in Discord channels, etc., having very strong opinions that there is this romantic relationship between Ryne and Gaia. Some even go as far to say that, oh, they're just afraid to do it all the way because Japan is against LGBT, or being afraid to show it because being gay is illegal in some countries that the game is released in. Now, let me make two things clear. First, I'm not here to talk about SJW bullcrap, as I'm just a dude who enjoys discussing video games and why they're great. And two, if you want to ship characters in your own headcanon, go for it. I'm not stopping anyone. I mean, I myself have a ton of headcanon in regards to a lot of other things. I think it's great that people are so enthusiastic about the stories told in this game that they end up with their own unique interpretations. But please, don't try to shove your headcanon down other people's throats. There really isn't anything in the game proper to give away the two having any sort of romantic attachment. If anything, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence showing the opposite, just the two being really close friends. I think an issue as well is that some people have a hard time discerning between different types of love, since not all love is romantic. So they just see some vague hints like, oh, these two characters are holding hands, ergo there must be romance there, or drawing conclusions based on things like if characters kiss or don't kiss each other, because as we know, kissing someone is the only way to show your feelings towards someone. That's exactly how real human attachments work. I'm being sarcastic, by the way. And this isn't meant to be some kind of an offense to anyone. These stories and these characters are complex, as is evident by these videos and having over 15,000 words dedicated to just talking about what is essentially just two characters. So it's honestly easy to misinterpret things. Plus, sometimes it can be a fine line between characters showing love romantically or non-romantically. And hell, I'm sure that in these very videos, I'm making observations that someone else may find stupid. So it's understandable that people come up with different ways to interpret different characters. But whenever talking about stuff like this, I try my best to stay as neutral as possible and just looking at what we are shown in the game. The fact that nothing straight up denies them having a romantic relationship definitely does not mean it's intended. It just means that the writers left it just ambiguous enough that you can make that headcanon. But as a whole, the story definitely shows them just being really close friends, brought together by their surrounding circumstances. So, to repeat myself, if you wanna ship them in your headcanon, great. But don't try to bring up some SJW bullcrap or try and enforce that opinion onto others, because the game definitely doesn't make that call to hint at any sort of romance and is more clearly trying to go for a tight friendship kind of a deal. With that out of my system, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, since this has been 4 freaking episodes long, Ryne's and Thancred's story arc in 5.0 was amazingly done. Even though there is a bit of controversy as to whether or not Thancred should have died, or if it was necessary to make his death seem so clickbaity, we saw Ryne going from a child who suffered from abusive parenting, who has very low self-esteem and struggles to make any decisions on her own, to someone who grows to have the courage to act of her own volition thanks to the bonds she had with the others. This went hand in hand with Thancred, who was struggling to be a good parent figure to her, as he was suffering from his past trauma with Minfilia, who then managed to overcome these fears and join the club of best Final Fantasy dads. Then there was Eden, where we got to see Ryne further grow in interesting ways now that she had the opportunity to do so, and Thancred having to cope with having to depart eventually. Then there was the 5.3 segment, which had an incredible send-off to their story with a beautiful scene that ought to make you cry. And now, Eden's Promise, where Ryne struggles a bit to be without her guardian figures, but is slowly growing to be responsible, and with Gaia, who we still haven't seen much of, but is set up to be a very interesting character between her relationship with Ryne and her unique background. So overall, really amazing characters and definitely crucial to the enjoyment of Shadowbringers. I loved going through their story arcs again and making these videos for sure. In terms of what I will be doing in the future, the next 2 characters I want to be looking at will most likely be Gratia and Imacuttlefish, both of which I am very excited about as well. I think Imacuttlefish is going to be similar to Ryne, where I will have to do takes on multiple characters at once, at the very least Elidibus. So if you want to see the videos on either one of those 2, I recommend sticking around this channel. Before I go, I want to leave another question here to hopefully start a discussion. Probably the most interesting question would be to ask, what is your opinion on Gaia? Do you think she's a good addition as a character? Or are you not really feeling her? Or are you perhaps just waiting for future patches to see where they go with her? Hit me up in DMs or in the comment section below. That's been all for today. Have a nice day.
This might be a result of losing control when you restored the ice element.
Yeah, and whose fault is that?
Well, I mean, let's not play the blame game.
No, I very much want to play the blame game right now.
Let's not get into, semantics about who did what.
I went and spent hours, literally hours.